Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video explores an alternate version of events and characters in a reimagined storyline. This presentation is structured and adopted into an audiobook style format with narration and visuals to enhance the experience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story.
Tyrion, they have my son, Tywin Lannister said. They do, my lord. The messenger's voice was dulled by exhaustion. On the breast of his torn surcoat, the brindled boar of Crake Hall was half obscured by dried blood. One of your sons, Tyrion thought. He took a sip of wine and said not a word, thinking of Jaime. When he lifted his arm, pain shot through his elbow, reminding him of his own brief taste of battle. He loved his brother, but he would not have wanted to be with him in the Whispering Wood for all the gold and Casterly rock. His lord father's assembled captains and bannermen had fallen very quiet as the courier told his tale. The only sound was the crackle and hiss of the log burning in the hearth at the end of the long, drafty common room. After the hardships of the long, relentless drive south, the prospect of even a single night in an inn cheered Tyrion mightily, though he rather wished it had not been this inn again, with all its memories. His father had set a grueling pace, and it had taken its toll. Men wounded in battle kept up as best they could or were abandoned to fend for themselves. Every morning they left a few more by the roadside, men who went to sleep, never to wake. Every afternoon a few more collapsed along the way, and every evening a few more deserted, stealing off into the dusk. Tyrion had been half tempted to go with them. He had been upstairs enjoying the comfort of a feather bed and the warmth of Shate's body beside him, when his squire had woken him to say that a rider had arrived with dire news of Riverrun. So it had been all for nothing, the rush south, the endless forced marches, the bodies left beside the road, all for naught. Robb Stark had reached Riverrun days and days ago. How could this happen? Sir Tyra's Swift moaned. How? Even after Whispering Wood, you had Riverrun ringed in iron, surrounded by a great host. What madness made Sir Jaime decide to split his men into 3 separate camps? Surely he knows how vulnerable that would leave them. Better than you chinless craven, Tyrion thought. Jaime might have lost Riverrun, but it angered him to hear his brother slandered by the likes of Swift, a shameless lickspittle, whose greatest accomplishment was marrying his equally chinless daughter to Catelyn, and thereby attaching himself to the Lannisters. I would have done the same, his uncle responded, a good deal more calmly than Tyrion might have. You have never seen Riverrun, Sir Harris, or you would know that Jaime had little choice in the matter. The castle is situated at the end of the point of land where the Tumblestone flows into the Red Fork of the Trident. The rivers form 2 sides of a triangle, and when danger threatens, the Tullys open their sluice gates upstream to create a wide moat on the 3rd side, turning Riverrun into an island. The walls sheer from the water, and from their towers the defenders have a commanding view of the opposite shores for many leagues around. To cut off all the approaches, a besieger must needs place 1 camp north of the Tumblestone, 1 south of the Red Fork, and a 3rd between the rivers, west of the moat. There is no other way. None. Ser Gavin speaks truly, my lords, the courier said. We'd built palisades of sharpened stakes around the camps, yet it was not enough, not with no warning and the rivers cutting us off from each other. They came down on the north camp first. No one was expecting an attack. Mark Piper had been raiding our supply trains, but he had no more than 50 men. Ser Gamgee had gone out to deal with them the night before. Well, with what we thought was them. We were told the Stark host was east of the Green Fork marching south, and your outriders? Sir Driegor Clegane's face might have been hewn from rock. The fire in the hearth gave a somber orange cast to his skin and put deep shadows in the hollows of his eyes. They saw nothing. They gave you no warning. The bloodstained messenger shook his head. Our outriders had been vanishing. Mark Piper's work, we thought. The ones who did come back had seen nothing. A man who sees nothing has no use for his eyes, the mountain declared. Cut them out and give them to your next outrider. Tell him you hope that 4 eyes might see better than 2, and if not, the man after him will have 6. Lord Catelyn Lannister turned his face to study Ser Grugger. Tyrion saw a glimmer of gold as the light shone off his father's pupils, but he could not have said whether the look one of approval or disgust. Lord Catelyn was oft quiet in council, preferring to listen before he spoke, a habit Tyrion himself tried to emulate. Yet this silence was uncharacteristic even for him, and his wine was untouched. "You said they came at night," Catelyn prompted. The man gave a weary nod. "The Blackfish led the van, cutting down our sentries and clearing away the palisades for the main assault. By the time our men knew what was happening, riders were pouring over the ditch banks and galloping through the camp with swords and torches in hand. I was sleeping in the west camp, between the rivers. When we heard the fighting and saw the tents being fired, Lord Brax led us to the rafts and we tried to pull across. But the current pushed us downstream, and the Tullys started flinging rocks at us with the catapults on their walls. I saw one raft smashed to kindling, and 3 others overturned. Men swept into the river and drowned, and those who did make it across found the Starks waiting for them on the riverbanks." Sir Flemont Brax wore a silver and purple tabard in the look of a man who cannot comprehend what he has just heard. "My lord father." "Sorry, my lord," the messenger said. Lord Brax was clad in plate and mail when his raft overturned. He was very gallant. The messenger then went on to describe how the crossing between the rivers was overrun as well by Starks, and how Lord Umber fired the siege towers, and Robb Stark led the butchery of Lannister soldiers. Tyrion could feel his heart beginning to sink as the messenger continued to speak. Not only had the remnants of Jaime's host been defeated, they had been massacred. He dreaded to think how many men had survived. Lord Lafford was the brave man who asked that question. "How many men managed to escape the butchery?" The messenger swallowed nervously before saying 2,000 spearmen and as many bowmen survived, my lords, and were led back to the Golden Tooth by Sir Forley Prester. This was met by silence, then a sudden outpouring of men shouting one thing or another. Many, including Cersei Swift and Lord Lefford, demanded that they sue for peace with the Stark boy to leave them free to fight Lord Stannis. Tyrion snorted, "Peace." He took his cup, swirled his wine around, and then threw the cup to the floor, watching as it shattered on the ground. "There's your peace, Sir Harkis. My sweet nephew broke it for good and all when he decided to ornament the Red Keep with Lord Eddard's head. You'll have an easier time drinking wine from that cup than you will convincing Robb Stark to make peace now. He's winning, or hadn't you noticed?" "2 battles do not make a war," Sir Adam insisted. "We are far from lost. I should welcome the chance to try my own steel against this Stark boy. Perhaps they would consent to a truce and allow us to trade our prisoners for theirs. Unless they trade 3 for 1, we still come out light on those scales," Tyrion said acidly. "And what are we to offer for my brother? Lord Axelrotting Head?" "I had heard that Queen Cersei has the Hand's daughters," Lefford said, hopefully. "If we give the lad back his sisters back," Sir Adam snorted, disdainfully. "He would have to be an utter ass to trade Jaime Lannister's life for 2 girls. Then we must ransom Cersei Jaime, whatever it costs," Lord Lefford said. Tyrion rolled his eyes. "If the Starks feel the need for gold, they can melt down Jaime's armor. If we ask for a truce, they will think us weak," Sir Adam argued. "We should march on them at once. Surely our friends at court could be prevailed upon to join us with fresh troops," said Sir Harys, "and someone might return to Casterly Rock to raise a new host." Lord Tywin rose to his feet. "They have my son," he said once more, in a voice that cut through the babel like a sword through suet. "Leave me, all of you." Ever the soul of obedience, Tyrion rose to depart with the rest. But his father gave him a look. "Not you, Tyrion. Remain, and you as well, Cabin. The rest of you out." Tyrion sat himself down and waited for his father to speak. When his father did speak, the words that came out of Lord Tywin's mouth sounded oddly like agreement. "You have it right about Stark. Alive, we might have used Lord Eddard to forge a peace with Winterfell and Riverrun. A peace that would have given us the time we need to deal with Robert's brothers." Tyrion found himself wanting to know something he had long suspected. Why did Joff have Lord Eddard executed, father? And in a rare moment where Tywin Lannister's face seemed almost, what was the word, soft, he said, because Lord Eddard denounced Joffrey and said he was not the true king. He also said that Lord Stannis and Renly were not the true heirs to the throne. No, he said that his bastard Jon Snow was the rightful king to the throne, as he is the last remaining child of Rhaegar Targaryen through his marriage with Lyanna Stark. The expression on Tywin Lannister's face was grim as he spoke, and all Tyrion could do was stare at his father. Ser Cavan too was gobsmacked, and it was he who spoke first. "Surely that cannot be Tywin. There was only Aerys children after the sack left. Lady Lyanna died. How is this possible?" Lord Tywin looked at Tyrion then, and suddenly Tyrion knew how, because Uncle Rhaegar Targaryen ran away with Lyanna Stark, a year after the tyranny of Harrenhal. He was gone for a whole 8 months before he returned for the trident. Enough time to conceive a child with Lady Lyanna. Lord Eddard fought 3 of the finest knights of the Kingsguard when he went to get his sister from Doran, including the Lord Commander. Now why else would the 3 knights of the Kingsguard, who are sworn to protect the king above all else, remain in Doran after the sack, if they were only there to protect Lyanna Stark? Why would they not be in Dragonstone with Viserys? Because that child that was Rhaegar's and Lyanna's was a boy and was the heir to the throne, they died protecting their king. Lord Tyvsley nodded and said, "This is why we must deal with the Starks first before they have the opportunity to crown Jon Targaryen, and we lose the chance to ally with other houses. Our position is than Lords Lefford and Swift know, though there is one more king in the land. Renly Baratheon has wed Margaery Tyrell and has been crowned king in Highgarden. He has the strength of the Reach and the Stormlands behind him now." Lord Tyvsley looked at Sir Kevan as he spoke. Next, "Kevan, unleash Ser Wrecker. Have him burn the Riverlands. I want to draw Robb Stark out into the open again, and this time we shall be waiting for him. We shall make for Harrenhal. Write to Stafford and tell him to bring a host up the Golden Tooth. We shall surround Robb Stark and end him." Ser Kevan nodded and said, "It shall be done." He then turned to Tyrion and said, "You shall not be marching to Harrenhal with us. You shall be going to King's Landing." Now Tyrion was deeply surprised. "Whatever for?" Lord Tywin merely looked at him before saying, "To rule, until the war in the Riverlands is over, and I can return to the capital. You shall serve as hand in my name. Rein Joffrey in and bring stability to his rule, and if any of these counselors are playing us false on his small council, you know what to do." Tyrion sighed. "Spikes, heads, walls, now be gone, and do not take that whore of yours to the capital." Sansa. If she had thought that King's Landing was a cage before, since her father's execution, it had Maon become a prison. Everywhere she went she was followed, either by a knight of the King's Guard, or by a red cloak. The Lannister guards. She hated it. She hated the city. She hated the Red Keep. She hated Cersei, and most of all, she hated Joffrey. Looking back now, she could not understand how she had thought herself in love with him, how she had thought him good and kind and better than Jon. Joffrey was not good, nor was he kind. He was cruel and evil, and she hoped he would die. She prayed for his death frequently. She still remembered when he had taken her out onto the walls of the Red Keep to where her father's head had been put, and showed her her father's rotting head. "You see what happens to traitors? Once this war is done, I'll have you brother and your cousin's heads on this wall, and I'll make you come out here and kiss them." Joffrey had said, a mad gleam in his eyes. Sansa had been terrified looking at the already rotting head of her father, and was now petrified that what Joffrey had said would come true. Joffrey had quickly gotten bored of standing in front of the heads, and had walked back inside, but not before saying, "It is to be my name day soon. What shall you be getting me, my lady?" This was what confused Sansa, how Joffrey could be horrible the one minute and so charming the next. She did not understand how or why he was like that, and she found she detested him all the more for it. He was nothing like Jon, or Jon who, if what father had said was true, was the true king of Westeros. The thought alone made her feel giddy. Her Jon was a king as well as a true knight. Oh, she couldn't wait to see him again, and this time she would tell him that she felt that she loved him with all her heart. She desperately wanted to see Jon again, and her siblings and mother. Sansa's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a knock on her door, calling for whoever it was to come in. She found herself looking at the bulky figure of Sir Meryn Trant. She instantly felt the panic and horror that came with seeing a knight of the Kingsguard now, for it could only mean one thing: Joffrey wished to see her. "The king wishes to see you in the throne room, my lady," Sir Meryn said. But why? I haven't done anything wrong. Please don't make me go, please. I promise I won't do anything bad. Please don't make me go." Sansa pleaded, hating that her voice was beginning to break. Sir Meryn merely looked at her before saying, "I'm afraid I cannot do that, my lady. The king has asked for your presence in the throne room, and so you can either come of your own free will, or I shall have to take you there myself." Sansa knew that Sir Meryn would not hesitate to drag her down to the throne room. He had done so before when Joffrey had wanted her to see her father's head. Sighing, she said, "I will come, Sir Meryn. Lead the way." As she followed Sir Meryn out of her room and toward the throne room, she couldn't help the feeling of dread that began to pool in the bottom of her stomach. What could Joffrey want from her? Why would he wish to speak with her in the throne room? It turned out that Joffrey was holding court in the throne room when she arrived. listening to the people, both lords and small folk, bring their woes and questions to him. He had a completely bored look on his face, and more often than not ordered a very harsh order concerning the relevant case that he heard, something that Sansa knew instinctively that neither Robb nor Jon would do. They would actually pay attention to what was being said. Much to her horror, the only time Joffrey really seemed to pay attention was when there was some dispute that was brought before him. Then he would get the same mad gleam in his eyes that he had had when he had showed her father's head, and he would more often than not order the two people involved in the dispute whipped, flayed, or have them fight to the death. It scared Sansa just how cruel Joffrey could truly be, and it made her question why she had ever truly thought she loved him. He was nothing like Jon at all, where Joffrey was all fake smiles and cruelty. Jon, though he smiled rarely when he did smile, Sansa remembered that it lit up his whole face and made him seem like a prince-king. Really, she supposed, and he was king and honorable, just the sort of man father wanted for her. Sansa found out why Joffrey had summoned her to the throne room soon after the last of the appeals had been heard. He called her forward and said, "Do you know why I summoned you here, Sansa?" "No, your grace," Sansa said, fear beginning to creep up in her. "Your traitor of a brother and cousin fought against my uncle's army at Riverrun a few days hence. My uncle lost the battle and was captured. My mother says that your traitor of a brother only won through deceit and trickery. She says that Northmen have no honor nor are they real men who fight properly. She says that they are savages. And do you know what we do with savages, my lady?" Sansa shook her head. No, she did not know what he did with savages. Joffrey had a mad sound in his voice when he said, "We beat them, Sir Meryn." And before she knew it, Sansa was being knocked to the ground, having just been punched in the stomach by Sir Meryn Tran of the Kingsguard. Sansa lay on the ground, winded, but she heard Joffrey nonetheless. "I do not think she is any less savage, Sir Meryn. Pick her up and do it again." Sansa felt herself being lifted up into a standing position once more, only to feel Sir Meryn's gloved fist hit her stomach again and again until blood began to come out of her mouth. She was relieved when Joffrey called for it to stop. "Dog, give her your cloak to tidy herself up. We are having guests tonight, and I do not wish for my lady to look like the savage she is." Varys, the cells where the dragon skulls were kept deep beneath the Red Keep, was a good place as any to have secret conversations that you did not wish for others to hear. The spider had found over the years, and now the place seemed even more fitting to hold this particular conversation, considering the dragons were coming back to life both figuratively and physically. Varys had not truly believed that Eddard Stark would have confessed his greatest secret before the whole of King's Landing. He had thought the man would have said the words that Cersei Lannister had put in his mouth, and he would have been executed by Joffrey anyway. But he had confessed his greatest secret, and now the whole of King's Landing knew the truth about Jon Snow's parentage. The King Joffrey was becoming more and more paranoid by the day, and was doing things that even his mother was unable to stop him from doing, such as beating the Lady Sansa. Varys knew that Jon Targaryen knew the truth of his parentage now. His spies within the Stark Tully camp had reported as much. All they needed now was for the two Baratheon brothers to put aside their quarrel, and the Lannisters would be finished. "You think too much, my friend." Varys turned to look at the darkened figure of Illyrio Mopatis and laughed. "But it is us deep thinkers who always come out on top. Old friend, all of our planning is coming to fruition." "That is so, but how do we know that our king will truly end up on the winning side?" "I have heard disturbing rumors, old friend. It is said that your Lord Stannis has a red priestess with him on Dragonstone. You know she believes him to be the chosen one. Come again, she will not let her chosen king kneel, not without a fight. How are we to defend our king from her should she choose to send her creations after him?" Varys sighed and said Stannis Baratheon is a man with to his honor and duty. Once he receives word of Eddard Stark's death and his last confession, he will try and bend the knee to our king. If the Red Woman tells him to fight, then we shall kill her, and then kill him. Renly will be a more complicated matter. He has the Tyrells with him, and they are not so loyal as they once were. They want their daughter to be queen, and for a grandson to be king. They will not achieve that with our king, for he loves the Lady Sansa. They may join with the Lannisters should Renly die. Varys heard Illyrio breathe deeply as they walked past the huge skull of Balerion, the Black Dread. "And where is our White Knight, my friend?" Varys replied, "I have sent Sodger Barristan to Riverrun along with Arya Stark, as a sign of good faith for our king. He was there in the grounds when Eddard Stark made his confession. He knows his duty. He already regrets serving King Robert, and shall feel honor-bound to serve the rightful king. Illyrio laughed. Then, you always did know how to read people well. My old spider, but pray tell, would it not have been better to send old Sir Barristan to Daenerys to make her cause seem more honorable? Varys replied, No, Daenerys is a lost cause. You told me she was lost with her khal somewhere in the Red Waste. She shall not be marching to Westeros anytime soon. Though even with her 2 dragons, she shall not be here soon. We need to act fast and quickly. Tell me, my friend, how is our black dragon doing? Illyrio chuckled. That depends which black dragon you speak of. The boy or the egg? Both. The boy is dying of a fever on the Shy Maid. Jon Connington is beside himself. The fool still thinks of him as Rhaegar Targaryen's son. Septa Lemore, however, knows the truth, and wrote me before I came asking to see her beloved Brandon's nephew. The egg is of course with Sir Barristan, and shall be ready to hatch once our king touches it. I was assured by my friends on Dragonstone. Very well then, Varys said. Until we meet again. And with that, the spider and the cheesemonger went their separate ways for the time being to plot anew. Catelyn. News of Ned's death had reached them that morning in Riverrun, and it had hit the lords and her boys hard. Catelyn herself felt numb to the pain, numb to the grief, numb to the condolences being given to her by her son's bannermen and her father's. All she could think of was how she would never see Ned again, how she would never feel his arms on her chest, or see his smiles that made her feel like she was the queen of the world. Her children would never get to see their father again. She had had to put aside her grief, though, when she had gone to look for Robb and Jon after hearing the news. Jon had still been in shock from learning the truth of his parentage, and Catelyn could tell just by looking at him sat on the base of a tree in the Godswood, staring blankly into space, whilst Robb hacked and slashed his sword to pieces, that the news of the death of the only man he had seen as his father had deeply affected him. It had deeply affected all of them. Robb had stopped his furious attack on the tree when he heard her step on a twig, and had turned to her with red eyes. Still crying, he had dropped his sword and rushed into her outstretched arms, and had muffled oaths of killing all the Lannisters in existence into her shoulder. At that moment, Robb was not the 15-year-old man who was leading a host to war, nor was he the 15-year-old Lord of Winterfell. In that moment, he was her boy, who had lost his father and was scared and was grieving all at once. She had told him in the only way she knew how through her grief and pain that they had to get the girls back. Then they would kill the Lannisters, every single last one of them. Jon had remained quiet throughout, and Catelyn feared that he would never speak again when they had called a council meeting in the Great Hall of Riverrun. Robb had told her that Jon was not even speaking to him or Theon or Torrhen Karstark. He was remaining deathly silent. He had maintained his silence throughout the whole of the council meeting, which had been called to discuss their next move. Many of the lords were all for keeping the fighting going, not wanting to let the Lannisters get off easy after killing their liege lord. Catelyn's attempts to bring the lords to sue for peace had been shot down. Robb had drawn his sword and said that was the only peace he had for the Lannisters. Catelyn knew she had lost them when Lord Blackwood proposed that why should they bend the knee to the king who had burned their homes and killed their people, and Lord Bracken had agreed. Throughout this, the discussion often altered back between whom they should declare for Stannis or Renly. Roby had argued against declaring for Renly, saying Lord Renly is Robert's younger brother. That does not make him king, for Bran cannot inherit Winterfell before me can. He and so Renly cannot become king before Stannis. Mark Piper had argued fiercely for declaring for Renly, stating that with Highgarden and the Stormlords behind him, he was a force to be reckoned with, and that if they were to declare for him, Doran would not be far behind, nor would the Vale. The Lannisters would be outmatched. And what did Stannis Baratheon bring to the table? When he put it like that, Catelyn could see the sense in declaring for Renly, though she knew Lysa would never call her banners, especially not if the Lannisters saw fit to send Patter to her. Throughout all of these discussions, Jon remained quiet, and Catelyn wondered what he was thinking. For she knew that he had the only rightful claim to the throne out of all the contenders, but he seemed content to be quiet. Even Ghost, who was sat at his feet, gave no indication as to what Jon's feelings were, though Grey Winds moving around the hall showed Robb's frustration. Eventually, Catelyn could tell Robb had had enough as he raised his voice and spoke in what she had come to associate as his lord's voice, said, My lords, it is all well and good speaking about which Baratheon brother to declare for, but it would be all for naught, as they do not have the true claim to the Iron Throne. Careful, Robb, tread carefully here. Catelyn thought as she saw Jon look up for the first time in the council session. If not them, then who, my lord? Catelyn heard Sir Stavron ask, why the last surviving son of the dynasty that created the Iron Throne and united the Seven Kingdoms, of course. The last son of Rhaegar Targaryen. Robb. But all the dragons are dead, my lord, Catelyn heard Lord Umber protest. Robb, however, had a wry grin on his face when he replied, no, my lord, no they are not. For one of them sits before now. Catelyn watched transfixed as her son got down on one knee before Jon. Drawing his sword and laying at Jon's feet, she heard him say, I am you brother now and always. To which Jon replied, now and always. Robb smiled up through his hair at Jon and said, then I, Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell, do hereby pledge my sword and my fealty to you. Jon Targaryen, rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, from this day to my last. I swear it by ice, I swear it by fire, I swear it by the old gods and the new. Catelyn watched as Theon Greyjoy followed Robb and got down on bended knee and said, I, Theon Greyjoy, heir to the Iron Islands, hereby pledge my sword and my fealty to you, Jon Targaryen. Rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, from this day to my last. I swear it by salt, I swear it by sea, I swear it by the drowned god, the old gods and the new. Catelyn continued watch as more and more of Robb's and her father's bannermen got down on bended knee and pledged their swords and their fealty to Jon, recognizing him as their rightful king and rightful king of Westeros. She watched and heard as the great Jon bellowed at the top of his lungs, long live the dragons, long live the king. She heard as all the other lords in the room, including her son and her brother, shouted, long live the king, long live King Jon. Next to her, Ghost and Grey Wind began to howl, and she could have sworn she heard the roaring of dragons from ages past. The dragons were back. Tyrion. King's Landing was as big and as foul a city as he remembered it being. Tyrion had been to the capital of the Seven Kingdoms exactly 4 times in his whole life before now. The first time had been for his sister's wedding when he was no more than a boy. The last 3 times had all been for tournaments. This was a city full of vipers, and Tyrion had the feeling he was going to like living here. At least for the time being. His first day serving as Hand of the King had not, however, gone accordingly. He had at first been refused entry into the small council chamber by Sir Mandon Moore of the King's Guard, and only after subtly threatening the man's safety had he finally, albeit grudgingly, allowed in. His sister had greeted him coldly, questioning why it was he and not their father who was in the city. Why it was he and not their father who had come to curb Joffrey's madness. Why it was he and not Jaime who had been sent to help defend the city. She had asked him, or more like, demanded these answers from him in front of the whole of the small council, and Tyrion had had to ask of a private talk with his sister before he could deem it sufficient to give her the answers he had. Looking back now, he knew that the answers he had given Cersei had not been entirely truthful, nor had they really helped his cause in any way. Cersei seemed to be growing more and more paranoid by the day. Fearful it seemed for her and Joffrey's safety should Stannis or Renly took it into their heads to invade King's Landing. She spared not a thought for Tom or Marsala, and it was only when Tyrion had played a trick on Pascal, Littlefinger, and Varys, as to whom the prince and the princess were to be marrying, that she had truly shown any interest in her 2 younger children at all. Questioning whom he thought he was to betroth Marsala to a prince of Dorne, when Dorne were just as likely to kill Marsala as welcome her with open arms. As usual, she had missed the point. Dorne had yet to declare for any one of the kings currently fighting in the realm, and could provide a suitable distraction for the forces of Highgarden should they so choose to do so. They only needed a reason to mobilize their spears, and by betrothing Marsala to Prince Trestane, Tyrion had explained he hoped to give them such a reason. Of course, what he hadn't mentioned was that he hoped to get Myrcella and Tommen away from Cersei's maddening influence and try and prevent them from becoming like Joffrey, who by all accounts was turning into a right little tyrant of a monarch. Twice Tyrion had walked into the throne room to see him having Sansa Stark beaten by men of the King's Guard, simply because of her last name. Tyrion had questioned him as to whether he had completely taken leave of his sense that he thought beating his betrothed, whose cousin had declared himself king and was winning that side of the war, was really a good idea. Joffrey had, of course, replied with an answer that was so Cersei in nature. Tyrion was surprised that she was not the one sitting the Iron Throne. Joffrey had said that Sansa was a traitor and a savage, and that savages needed to be brought to heel through any means necessary. One look at Sansa Stark after the second beating told Tyrion all he needed to know. Joffrey had lost any love or loyalty that she may have had for him, and so he had put himself in significantly more danger than if he had only let her be. For though Sansa Stark seemed to be demure little lady, there was a steel in those tawny blue eyes that reminded Tyrion of the steel he had seen in Eddard Stark's eyes at Winterfell. Tawny she may look, but the girl had the hardness of the North in her veins, and there was a common saying amongst the small folk. The North remembers that the great Jon Snow, or was it Targaryen, was winning battles. It was very likely that all of their heads, Joffrey, Cersei, Tyrion, Jaime, and Tywin, would be gracing spikes up on the walls of the Red Keep. News that a host led by Gregor Clegane had been severely defeated at the Battle of the Red Fork by forces led by Jon had severely worsened spirits amongst the Lannisters in King's Landing. Clegane himself had managed to retreat back to Harrenhal with some 300 men out of the 2,000 he had left with. Though there was some good news to be had for all of this, King Jon had allowed his riverlords to retreat back to their own holdfast and castles to drive out the remaining Lannister forces not at Harrenhal and to bring in one last harvest. This news Tyrion knew gave his father a small opening to perhaps lay siege to Riverrun once again. And with Tyrion's uncle Stafford assembling another host at Casterly Rock, by the time King Jon knew what was happening, he would be surrounded and unable to move. Something that would hopefully give them a chance to deal with the Baratheon brothers, both of whom, it seemed, were content to simply allow the Lannisters and the Starks to spend their forces on each other before probably making a claim on King's Landing itself. It was surprising Tyrion had to admit that Stannis had not yet declared for King Jon, given the fact that the man was so wedded to his duty and honor. Tyrion had assumed he would rally behind the man Lord Eddard Stark had named as the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Something Tyrion knew was the truth given Joffrey's actual parentage, but that was hardly something he would care to share with either his nephew or sister if he wished to keep his head. Jon, the crown that sat atop his curls, felt heavy upon his head. But Jon dared not take it off lest it be seen as a sign of weakness. He still had a hard time believing that he was truly king. Everything had happened so fast. One moment he had been grieving with Robb over the death of the only man he had ever known as his father. The next Robb was bending the knee to him and declaring him the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, as did the rest of the men in Riverrun, be they Northern Lords or River Lords. They had all declared him their king, the Seven Kingdoms' king. And so Jon Snow, the former bastard of Eddard Stark, had become Jon Targaryen's son, Rhaegar, Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, and king. It all seemed like a dream, some sort of nightmarish dream that never seemed to end. He had been crowned officially in the Sept of Riverrun. The Septon had placed a crown which contained the runes of the First Men and the written letters of the Andals, and had 7 blades face upward, representing the 7 kingdoms on his head, and had declared him King Jon Targaryen, king of the First Men, Andals, and lord of the 7 kingdoms. Jon had sworn to himself that he would try and be a good king. He would try and make his father, uncle, really his aunt, and Robb proud. He wanted to be a king that knew his subjects and a king that put their needs above his own. This was why he was sat in the great hall of Riverrun with Robb by his right-hand side, waiting for Ser Cleos Frey to be brought from his cell. When the herald announced Ser Cleos' arrival, Jon straightened up in the chair he was sat in, and then called for his sword. Robin Ryder said, "Your grace here is the man you asked for. Kneel before the King Lannister," Jon heard Theon Greyjoy shout. The man kneeling before him did not look a Lannister. He did not have the blonde hair or the arrogant-looking green eyes, nor the proud jutting of chest that the man's cousin, the Kingslayer, had. No, this man was all Frey. He had the weasel look about him for sure. "Riz Ser Cleos," Jon said, trying to keep his voice as commanding as possible as he watched Ghost walk round him, sniffing him. Through Ghost, Jon could smell the fear radiating of the man, which multiplied further when Greywind joined his brother in sniffing Ser Cleos. "Thank you, my lord," Ser Cleos said. "Your grace," barked Jon Umber, ever the man to show his loyalty to Jon and to Robb. "Your grace," Ser Cleos said hastily. "Pardons?" It would have taken Jaime Lannister much more than that to get him to give Jon his title. Jon thought, the man would more than likely want to dance with a bear than acknowledge me as king. Then again, frights are often a chinless sort. I brought you from your cell to carry my message to your cousin Cersei Lannister in King's Landing. You'll travel under a peace banner, with 30 of my best men escort you. Sir Cleos was visibly relieved. Then I should be most glad to bring his Grace's message to the Queen. Understand, Jon said, his voice becoming like iron. I am not giving you your freedom. Your grandfather, Lord Walder, pledged my cousin, his support, and that of House Frey. Many of your cousins and uncles rode with us in the Whispering Wood, but you did not. You chose to fight under a lion banner that makes you a Lannister, not a Frey. I want your pledge, on your honor as a knight, that after you deliver my message, you'll return with the Queen's reply and resume your captivity. Sir Cleos replied at once, I do so vow. Every man in this hall has heard you, warned Lord Yadmir Tully, who spoke for Riverrun and the Lords of the Trident in place of his dying father. If you do not return, the whole realm will know you forsworn. I will do as I pledged. Sir Cleos replied stiffly. What is this message? An offer of peace, Jon said, standing with sword in hand. Ghost moved to his side. The hall grew hushed. Tell the Queen Regent that if she meets my terms, I shall sheath this sword and end this war between us. Out of the corner of his eye, Jon could see Torrhen Karstark holding on to his father's arm, preventing him from storming out of the hall. Jon continued drawing the paper out of his sleeve. First, the Queen must release my cousins and provide them with transport by sea from King's Landing to White Harbor. It is to be understood that Sansa's betrothal to Joffrey Waters is at an end. When I receive word from Winterfell's Castellan that my cousins have returned unharmed, I will release the Queen's cousins, the Squire Willem Lannister and your brother Tywin Frey, and give them safe escort to Casterly Rock, or wheresoever she desires them delivered. Secondly, my lord uncle's bones will be returned to us so that he may be buried in the crypts beneath Winterfell as he would have wished. The remains of the men of his household guard who died in his service in King's Landing are also to be returned. Third, the great sword Ice must be delivered to my cousin Robb's hand here at Riverrun. Fourthly, the Queen will command Lord Tywin to release those knights and lords bannermen of my cousin and Lord Edmure that he took captive during the Battle of the Green Fork of the Trident. Once he does so, I shall release my own captives taken in the Whispering Wood and the Battle of the Camps, save Jaime Lannister, who will remain my hostage for his father's good behavior. Lastly, Joffrey Waters and Cersei Lannister must renounce all claims to holding the Iron Throne. Cersei Lannister must spend the remainder of her days either in the Silent Silets or in Casterly Rock. Joffrey Waters, for the crime of executing my lord uncle for no rhyme nor reason, can suffer either death by execution or he can take the black. It is up to him, Tommen, and Myrcella. Waters shall become wards of the Iron Throne and will be free to do as they wish once they come of age. Tywin Lannister must also revoke his claim to Casterly Rock and take the black, as must his son Tyrion Lannister. In addition, the Lannisters and their bannermen must deliver 10 highborn hostages each year as a pledge of peace, which shall be treated as honored guests as befits their rank and station. I shall release 2 hostages each year and return them safely to their families. These are my terms, Cersei Thlies. If she meets them, the land shall know peace. If not, then winter shall come for her and hers with fire and blood. The Queen shall hear your message, your grace. Sir Cleos said, looking the color of curdled milk. Good, then we are done here. So Robin, see that he has a good meal and clean clothing. He's to ride at first light. As you command, your grace. Sir Robin Ryger replied. Jon sat down as Sir Cleos was led away, and turned to look at Robb then and said, What is next, Lord Stark? Robb had a wry grin on his face when he replied, One more petitioner, your grace, and that is that. Jon nodded. Good, bring them forward. I would hear them speak. As he said those words, Jon saw an old man with a cane and a young boy with closely cropped brown hair step forward. There was something familiar about the boy, though Jon could not quite place what it was. He felt like he had seen the boy somewhere before, though he could not be sure. What is your business here, good friend? Jon asked. The old man spoke then. I have traveled many a mile, your grace, to return to your family something that it lost when Lord Eddard was executed. Jon was curious now, and he could tell Robb and Aunt Catelyn were as well, so he asked, And what could this possibly be, good friend? The old man smiled then and turned to the boy and said, Show them your eyes, girl. And the person Jon had thought a boy did that, and Jon nearly had a heart attack. Looking at him were the same gray eyes as his, Those gray eyes that belonged to a girl he had called Little Sister for as long as she had been alive, whom he had last seen in Winterfell all those years ago. Arya, he whispered, and Arya was for only she could race up the stairs to where he sat in such quick time, and throw herself into his arms without a care for the people watching. As she hugged him tightly and Jon hugged her back just as tightly, he said, "Good sir, I thank you for bringing my cousin back to us safely. Whatever reward you wish, if it is in my power to grant it, you shall have it. You need only name it." As Arya disentangled herself from Jon and ran to hug Robb and ran down the steps to hug and stand beside her mother, the old man had drawn his sword and had laid it down on the ground and had kneeled beside it and spoke in a voice of iron. "Your Grace, the only reward that I could truly wish is that you grant me the chance to make up for the sins I have committed in my life and give me the chance to serve you as I once served your father and grandfather." Jon was intrigued. "Now, you served my father, good sir. You served Prince Rhaegar Targaryen." "Your Grace, I did. I fought beside him at the Trident during Robert's rebellion. I should have kept fighting for your uncle and grandfather and never have bent the knee," the old man replied. "Who are you?" Jon heard Robb ask, though Jon had begun to suspect who the man could be. "I am Barristan Selmy, my lord, known as Ser Barristan the Bold, a knight of the King's Guard since I was 23, and I would serve the rightful king of Westeros till the end of my days, if he shall have me. That is the only reward I ask for." Jon looked at Ser Barristan for a long moment, considering what he had just heard. The man had fought alongside Prince Rhaegar and had seen him grow up. There was some innate part of Jon that wanted to know more about the man whose seed he was, but more insistently, there was a part of him that knew that with Ser Barristan fighting alongside him, he could draw more men to the cause. And besides, Ser Barristan had returned Arya to them, when the Lannisters had not even said she was missing. Having made up his mind, Jon said, "Very well. Senor Barristan, I accept your request and shall name you to my King's Guard as Lord Commander. If that is all, you may all go. Except yourself, Senor Barristan, and you, Robe. Mother and Arya, I shall allow you two to rest in your rooms." As the rest of the lords began to file out of the great hall, Jon remained seated on his chair and stroked Ghost's fur, wondering what Ser Barristan could tell him off the Lannisters' plans. When the last lord had left the room and the doors to the great hall had closed behind him, Jon rose up of his chair and made for the middle of the room where Ser Barristan stood. Robb and Grey Wind followed Jon into standing next to Ser Barristan. They stood in silence for a few minutes before Ser Barristan spoke. "Your Grace, I have come bearing more items. I could not present them to you in front of court, for I was unsure if there would be Lannister spies within the ranks. But the person who made it possible for your sister and myself to come before you today told me to give you these two things." Ser Barristan handed Jon a letter that was sealed with a symbol of a spider on the back and an egg. But not just any egg. Jon realized it was a dragon egg, black dragon egg with swirls of red on it, that began to shake as soon as Jon touched it, and he could feel the life from within it struggling to get out. And when he rubbed his right hand over the top of the egg, it broke open, and in the remains of the egg, sat in the palm of his left hand, was baby black dragon with red eyes. "Incredible," Jon whispered. "Indeed," Ser Barristan said. "Now you have the two living symbols of your house, Jon," Robb joked. Jon merely grinned at Robb before turning to Ser Barristan and asking, "Who sent you, Ser Barristan, and who gave you the egg?" Ser Barristan merely said, "Read the letter, your Grace, and it shall explain all." So Jon broke open the seal and together with Robb read the letter Ser Barristan had given him. "Your Grace, if you are reading this, then I shall assume that Ser Barristan was able to get you unharmed and unscathed, and was successful in returning Lady Erdir to yourself, and Lord Robb and Lady Catelyn. You may be wondering whom in this city of lions would wish to help you, or the Starks, but let me just say that I have seen enough innocents killed to know that the Lannisters would stop at nothing if it meant harming your progress to what is yours by rights. I have been keeping an eye on you since the day your uncle Lord Eddard brought you to Winterfell. For I have eyes and ears everywhere. Everything has been done to ensure that you remain protected and were allowed to grow up young and healthy and have the life that your siblings Aegon and Rhaenys could not have. I know that you may be wondering what to do next, considering that Lord Tywin is camped at Harrenhal and you destroyed Gregor Clegane's host at the Red Fork. I would suggest invading the Westerlands and drawing Lord Tywin out of Harrenhal would be a good idea. I would also suggest sending someone from your camp to treat with Lord Renly. For though the man has crowned himself king, he will be more willing to bend the knee to you if given the right terms. For truly it is the Tyrells who control him, and not the other way around. Stannis Baratheon is under the influence of a red priestess from Ashai, who will likely try and get him to fight you. Do not worry, as even as you read this, I am working on dealing with her. As for the Lady Sansa, I am doing all I can to see her safely return to you and your cousin. Never fear. Yours faithfully, the Spider. Jon and Robb finished reading the letter at the same time, and at the last word turned to each other and said, Varys, Davos. Surely my lord cannot mean to fight against Jon Targaryen. Eddard Stark named him the rightful king before he was executed. Why would he lie? Davos asked. I know not why Stark and Davos. All I know is that the Lady Melisandre and my lady wife have told me time and time again that this Jon Targaryen is an usurper and is not the chosen one, and that therefore I must fight him. Stannis replied, But my lord, of course they would say that. So fervent is their devotion in that red heathen that they would will you to kill a child if it pleased their god. But you are not that sort of man, my lord. You are just man. You are a man who believes in honor and duty. Eddard Stark was a man similar to you. He did not lie either, so why should you betray your vows, and fight against a man that by all rights is your lawful king? You know that Joffrey is not Robert's son, so why not fight for the man who is Prince Rhaegar's son? Stannis seemed frustrated, as if he were unsure whether or not to curse or praise Davos for his constant logical arguments. I know that, Davos, I know that. It is just that when the rebellion was fought and won, the Targaryens lost their claim to the throne, for Robert and House Baratheon had won it through conquest. If this Jon Targaryen wishes to win the throne, he too shall need to win it through conquest. But then, why not go for another Baratheon king? And if so, why not me? It is my right, as Robert's only true heir. Davos replied, Because your grace, the Lannisters would never let you on that throne so long as Joffrey Waters lives. But if you were to support King Jon, then surely you would get the rewards you deserve. Surely there is more honor supporting the rightful king than supporting a dynasty that has a base-born, incest-born bastard as its head. Davos knew he almost had Stannis on side, but before he could put another argument forward, Lady Melisandre, or the Red Woman as Davos called her, entered the room and said, There's no use fighting it, Lord Davos. His Grace is the one true king of Westeros, and the only one capable of fighting the darkness and bringing the light. He is Azir Azahi. Come again, and he must be king. But that would be going against everything Lord Stannis stands for. Davis argued. Lady Melisandre smiled and said, Jon is just a boy. He knows nothing of the upcoming fight. He knows nothing of darkness. He is not the king or the chosen one. Besides, your brother Renly has crowned himself king. Stannis looked up from his brooding when she said that, and Davos knew he had lost when Stannis said Renly has crowned himself king. Sarah Davos sent word to the men, We sail for Storm's End at first light. Varys, oh, it was so very cleverly done. Daenerys could almost have applauded Littlefinger. Of course he would have had the attention of Littlefinger's little bout of treason had not been focused on getting Sansa Stark away from the capital. Littlefinger had thought he was so smart by writing the note and then giving it to Serdintas to give to one of Sansa Stark's serving girls, thinking that no one would ever be able to trace it back to him. Of course, what Littlefinger did not know was that the spies he thought were his were in fact Varys's had always been Varys's. All the handmaidens that reported to Cersei belonged to Varys and only reported to Cersei what Varys told them to. It was all too much fun, letting all these people think they knew how to play the game, when really, Varys was playing all of them. For he and his family had been playing this game since the Iron Throne had been made. Of course he was going to be an expert at how to play against the odds and win each and every time. So he sent one of his little birds to the Godswood to listen to Serdontos drunkenly promise to take the Lady Sansa back home to her mother and brother, all the while knowing that really, what Littlefinger planned on doing was using her to claim the North, or perhaps even wedding her. Once the conversation was done, Varys had told the little bird watching it to bump into Sansa Stark and slip a note into her pocket. The note said something along the lines of, Trust not in mockingbirds, for they are fickle creatures. One snagged a trout and thought himself in love. Trust not the rose that will come to the lion's den. Trust not the spider who works diligently for the lion, but do trust that the wolf and the dragon shall emerge victorious, and your king shall be yours again. He could only hope she was as smart as she seemed, and would figure out what he meant in due time. He did not think the king would thank him otherwise. Riverrun was warmer than Winterfell, even in autumn, That was something Jon had quickly become aware of during their current month-and-a-half stay in his mother's ancestral home. Whilst in some instances, that was better for the army, e.e. in terms of them needing to use less wood for fuel and such. In other terms, it made Jon yearn for the simplicity of life in Winterfell all the more, where he didn't have to wear a bloody crown on his head or hear people call him Your Grace all the time, or even have a white shadows. He supposed now that Sir Perwyn had been given the white cloak by Sir Barristan. It was not that he did not truly wish to give up the crown, not now at least. It was just that sometimes he found the pressure and expectations that surrounded him to be crippling, and he often found himself wondering what Lord Eddard would have done in his place. For though he had spoken to Sir Barristan about his real father, he still did not truly consider himself a Targaryen, which of course made it harder for him to truly believe that the thoughts that he had had about Sansa, almost since the day they had marched for war, were entirely brotherly. Of course, now that he had called a meeting in the Lord Solar in Riverrun for himself, Robb, Lady Catelyn, the woman he would always consider his mother no matter whose womb he had come from, Sir Barristan, the Blackfish, and of course Lord Edmure himself, Jon had very little time to truly worry about anything else. He had important news to share. As he watched Lord Edmure enter the Solar that would one day be his, Jon couldn't help but think at the startling likeness between Robb and his uncle. It was as if he were looking at Robb during two different time stages in his life, and when the Blackfish entered the room that feeling was intensified, threefold. It made him feel rather like laughing, though he did suspect that were he to laugh, all three might question his sanity given the nature of the conflict they were currently engaged in. Sir Barristan sat to Jon's left as Robb sat to Jon's right. Lady Catelyn sat to the right of Robb, whilst Lord Edmure sat to her right, and the Blackfish sat to his right. When they were all seated, Jon began, "My lords and lady, thank you for coming. I have called this small meeting today to inform you that I have received news from the Vale." He paused, waiting to see what their reactions would be. It was Catelyn who asked the first question. "Has my sister finally come to her senses, then, and decided to call her banners?" Jon took a deep breath before saying, "Unfortunately not, my lady. The letter I received came from Renstone, not the Eyrie. It would appear Lord Royce and some other prominent Vale lords are quite fed up with staying out of this war and wish to join it. Lord Royce wrote me saying that he is marching down from the Bloody Gate with 20,000 men that will be placed under our disposal to do with as we see fit. I was rather hoping that we could have the full strength of the Vale to help crush the Lannisters. But alas, I suppose it is not to be." Robb turned to his mother and asked her, "Why isn't Aunt Lysa calling her banners, mother? Why is she allowing Lord Royce to do her work for her?" Lady Catelyn gave a deep sigh and then said, "Lysa has always been the type of person who would do something wrong and then run away from having to confess to doing it. Equally so, when she felt she was in trouble, be it from her own actions or those of others, she hid and would not come out until she felt it was safe to do so. Now is one such instance. She is scared for herself and for her son." The Blackfish nodded and said, "You can expect these 20,000 men that Jon has mustered to be the most help that the Vale will give us, lads. Anyway, what do you plan to do with these new men, your grace?" Jon looked at Robb, who nodded, and then said, "Well, I have talked through with Robb and Sir Barristan and have decided that it would be best if myself, Robb, Sir Barristan, and the rest of the northern host rode west to deal with the host of men that Sir Stafford is gathering there, and then move on to raid the Westerlands and potentially take Casterly Rock. As you know, I have already sent Lord Mallister to Pike to treat with Balon Greyjoy, but have yet to hear from him. Lord Aemor, I want you to write to Lord Bolton and tell him to bring his host south from the Twins. When Tywin Lannister learns that Casterly Rock is under threat of falling, he shall wish to march west. He will more than likely divide the command over the main bulk of his host to different people. You are not to allow those divisions to cross Lord Aemor. You are to write to Lord Bolton and tell him to bring men down from the Twins to strike at the middle of the Lannister host, by which point Lord Royce's men will be here. I will write to them and tell them to take Harrenhal and hold it. You are to allow the division commanded by Lord Tywin to pass through to the Westerlands, where we shall be waiting for them. Is that understood?" "Yes, your grace," Lord Avery replied. "Good," said Jon. "Now then, seeing as Lord Renly has crowned himself and has wed the Tyrell girl, and Lord Stannis has not answered the raven I sent him, I need someone to go and treat with Renly and convince him that bending the knee to me is the best he can hope for. Aunt Catelyn, I know that Arya has just been returned to us, and you would rather spend your time with her, but you are the only person I fully trust to carry out such a negotiation with Renly. I need Robb with me in the Westerlands, just as I need Lord Edmure and Sarah Brynden to hold the Riverlands. Arya would be safe here in Riverrun, and you yourself would be escorted by 20 of my best men, including Sarah Perwyn. What do you say? Jon could tell his aunt was not best pleased with what he had suggested, but he could almost hear her reciting the words of House Tully to herself in her head. Family, duty, honor, which one of those would she use to explain his move to herself? He wondered. I will go, your grace, though when I return I shall wish to return to Winterfell. It has been too long since I saw Bran and Rickon, Catelyn said. Jon smiled. Of course, my lady. After that, Jon allowed Lord Edmure and Sir Brynden to leave the Solar to go and make the appropriate preparations for having to deal with the Lannisters. Jon asked Robb and Catelyn to stay. Whilst he thought of the most appropriate way to broach the topic of what his heart desired, he watched Ghost and Greywind playfully nip at the black dragon that he now found himself the owner of. The dragon, which he had named Syrax, had grown frightfully quickly, was now the size of a small dog, and Maester Wyman had told him that he would continue to grow until his dying day. Eventually Robb cleared his throat and asked Jon, You asked me and my mother to stay, your grace. What is it you wish to talk about that could not be talked about in front of my uncles? Jon shifted uncomfortably before saying, I know that you are betrothed to one of Lord Frey's daughters, Robb, as Arya is betrothed to one of his sons, though she does not like it. He smiled wryly, before continuing. The thing is, I have not been approached by Sire Steffron, nor have I received any letter from Lord Walder asking if I would consider betrothing myself to one of his daughters also. I am beginning to wonder why that is. Robb gave a shrug, but Catelyn replied, It's because he's waiting and watching to see who emerges victorious. With there being so many kings in the land, I can assure you Lord Walder's caution sensors will be in overdrive. More than likely he will wait until you are sat on the Iron Throne, or Tywin Lannister is dead, or captured before he proposes another marriage. Therefore, if there is someone else you wish to marry Jon, you had best do it now. She gave him a pointed look then, and Jon felt his cheeks heat up. Lady Catelyn, he had suspected, had always known about his feelings for Sansa, but she had never said anything up until now. Coughing so as to clear his throat, he spoke. Well then, that makes matter a whole lot simpler. Real bad, I know that we grew up as close as brothers, though, in fact, we are cousins. But I would like to make it so that we were actually brothers. What I'm trying to say is that, if you would consent, I would ask Sansa for her hand in marriage. Robb was silent for what seemed like an age, and for a moment Jon feared that he would outright reject Jon's proposal. Then he broke out into a big grin and said, Of course I do. You big idiot, Jon. There's no one I'd rather Sansa marry, and I'm sure she'll tell you that herself once we get her back. Jon smiled, then embraced Robb and Lady Catelyn, and silently swore to himself that he would do whatever it took to get Sansa back, no matter the cost. Tyrion stood in front of his sister and said the words he had been waiting to say from the moment he had read them in a letter. Stannis has sailed from Dragonstone. Cersei bolted to her feet. And you sit there grinning like a Harvest Day pumpkin? Has Bywater called out the city watch? We must send a bird to Harrenhal at once. He was laughing by then. She seized him by the shoulders and shook him. Stop it. Are you made or drunk? Stop it. It was all he could do to get the words out. I can't, he gasped. It's God's too funny. Stannis. What? He hasn't sailed against us, Tyrion managed. He's laid siege to Storm's End. Renly is riding to meet him. His sister's nails dug painfully into his arms. For a moment she stared incredulous, as if he had begun to gibber in an unknown tongue. Stannis and Renly are fighting each other. When he nodded, Cersei began to chuckle. Gods be good, she gasped. I'm starting to believe Robert was the clever one. Tyrion threw back his head and roared. They laughed together. Cersei pulled him off the bed and whirled him around and even hugged him. For a moment as giddy as a girl. By the time she let go of him, Tyrion was breathless and dizzy. He staggered to her sideboard and put out a hand to steady himself. Do you think it will truly come to battle between them? If they should come to some accord, they won't, Tyrion said. They are too different, and yet too much alike, and neither could ever stomach the other. And Stannis has always felt he was cheated out of Storm's End, Cersei said thoughtfully. The ancestral seed of House Baratheon. His by-rights, if you knew how many times he came to Robert, singing the same dull song in that gloomy, aggrieved tone he has. When Robert gave the place to Renly, he clenched his jaw so tight I thought his teeth would shatter. He took it as a slight. It was meant as a slight. Shall we raise a cup to brotherly love? Yes, she answered breathlessly. Oh gods, yes. His back was to her as he filled 2 cups with sweet arbor red. It was the easiest thing in the world to sprinkle a pinch of fine powder into hers. To Stannis, he said as he handed her the wine. To Renly, she replied, laughing. May they battle long and hard, and the others take them both. Is this the Cersei that Jaime sees? When she smiled, you saw how beautiful she truly was. I loved a maid as fair as summer with sunlight in her hair. He almost felt sorry for poisoning her. The next morning, when he broke his fast and the messenger brought news that the Queen Regent was indisposed due to an upset stomach and made the appropriate sympathetic noises and sent word to Cersei to rest easy, he would treat with Sir Cleos as they'd planned. As he sat on the Iron Throne, he looked down on all the people gathered in the throne room, and found he liked it. Call forth Sir Cletus Frey. His voice rang of the stone walls and down the length of the hall. He liked that too. A pity Shay could not be here to see this, he reflected. She'd asked to come, but it was impossible. Sir Cleos made the long walk between the gold cloaks and the crimson, looking neither right nor left. As he knelt, Tyrion observed that his cousin was losing his hair. Sir Cleos, Littlefinger said from the council table, you have our thanks for bringing us this peace offer from Lord Targaryen. Grand Maester Peetsel cleared this throat. The Queen Regent, the King's Hand, and the small council have considered the terms offered by this self-styled usurper. Sad to say, they will not do, and you must tell him so. Sir, here are our terms, said Tyrion. Jon Targaryen must lay down his sword and come to King's Landing to face trial. Robb Stark and the Northmen and the River Lords must come to King's Landing to swear fealty to the Iron Throne and the return to their respective holdfasts. They must release my brother unharmed and place his host under my brother's command to march against the rebels, Renly and Stannis Baratheon. Each of Targaryen's bannermen must send us a son as a hostage. A daughter will suffice where there is no son. They shall be treated gently and given high places here at court, so long as their fathers commit no new treasons. Cleos Frey looked ill. My lord hand, he said. Lord Targaryen will never consent to these terms. We never expected he would, Cleos. Tell him that we have raised a great host at Casterly Rock, that soon it will march on him from the west, while my father advances from the east. Tell him that he stands alone, without a hope of allies. Stannis and Renly Baratheon war against each other, and the Prince of Dorne has consented to wed his son Trystane to the Princess Myrcella. Murmurs of delight and consternation alike arose from the gallery and the back of the hall, and out of the corner of his eye, Tyrion saw Varys leaning over to the side to hear as a messenger whispered something in his ear. As to this of my cousins, Tyrion went on, we offer Harryan Corstark and Cerwylus Manderly for Willem Lannister and Lord Cerwyn and Ser Donal Locke for your brother Tyrion. Tell Lord Targaryen that 2 Lannisters are worth 4 Northmen in any season. He waited for the laughter to die. His uncle's bones he shall have, as well as ice being returned to his cousin as a sign of good faith from King Joffrey. Lord Targaryen asked for his cousins as well. Sir Cleos reminded him. Tyrion glanced toward Sansa and felt a stab of pity as he said, until such time as he frees my brother Jaime, unharmed they shall remain here, as hostages. How well they are treated depends on him. And if the gods are good, Bywater will find Arya alive before Jon learns she's gone missing. I shall bring him your message, my lord. Tyrion plucked at one of the twisted blades that sprung from arm of the throne, and now the thrust. Violar, he called. My lord, the men Targaryen sent should be sufficient to protect Lord Yeager's bones, but a Lannister should have a Lannister escort, Tyrion declared. Ser Cleos is the queen's cousin and mine. We shall sleep more easily if you would see him safely back to Riverrun. As you command, how many men shall I take? Why? All of them. Vylar stood like a man made of stone. It was Grand Maester Peetsel who rose, gasping, My lord Hand, that cannot your father, Lord Tywin himself. He sent these good men to our city to protect Queen Cersei and her children. The King's Guard and the city watch protect them well enough. The gods speed you on your way, Vylar. Later, once court was done, Tyrion walked with Varys back to the Tower of the Hand and asked him about the messenger and what tiding he had brought. Varys looked around and then whispered to Tyrion, Dire news, my lord. How much dire could news get? Tyrion wondered. Very much so. Jon Targaryen has been joined by Ser Barristan and Selmy, who also brought him his sister the Lady Arya back. Tyrion was agape with shock. How? How is that possible? When the gold cloaks and red cloaks have been unable to find her, that Ser Barristan found her. Varys tittered. Perhaps there is a traitor amongst the ranks, my lord. Who knows? But that is not the only news the messenger brought. It seems some of the lords of the Vale have had enough of their lady's neutrality. Lord Royce of Runstone has called 20,000 men to arms and has marched from the Bloody Gate to help the usurper, Jon Targaryen. Tyrion felt his heart sink. Is there any way we can prevent them from fighting for him and get them to fight for us? Varys sighed. There has been no solution that I can think of, my lord, besides the Vale men. Do not regard House Lannister with much fondness, especially after that little episode where you were accused with Lord Doran's murder, which I had nothing to do with. Tyrion protested. Varys merely shrugged and said, I do not doubt you, my lord, but before I leave you, you might wish to take it into consideration that Littlefinger grew up alongside Lady Lysae. Perhaps he could be used to bring the Vale to heel, or perhaps he is the one who's responsible for this mess. With that, Varys walked away and left Tyrion with dark thoughts. Jon Connington, Aegon, was deeply unwell. He had caught the blue fever whilst they had been sailing across the Little Rhone and was now in the last stages of his young life. Jon could not help but feel like he had failed. He had failed the father by not crushing Robert's forces at the Battle of the Bells, and so his Silver Prince had been cut down at the Trident. He had been younger then with foolish ideas of chivalry and glory in his head, and it had cost them so many lives he was haunted still by the tolling of the bells that rung in the stony septa that day. And now he had failed the son. The Aegon had gone for a swim when they had been docked in a nice patch of water. But he had gone unaccompanied, and had come back running a fever which Haldon had later said was the blue fever, and of course no one had ever recovered from the blue fever. Jon had spent the past 3 weeks that Aegon had been bedridden, cursing himself and his stupidity. He was supposed to have been older and wiser than he had been at the Stony Sept. He should have known that letting Aegon go anywhere unaccompanied was a bad idea. They had had to rush back to Pentos 3 weeks ago, back to the cheesemonger's house, to have Aegon treated properly. But Aegon's condition had gotten so much worse. Jon knew that despite his best efforts to pretend otherwise, the boy was going to die, and it was his entire fault. He had failed the son just as he had failed the father. He turned around when he heard the door open, and found Thea looking at Septa Lemore. In another life they had both been friends with the prince and princess, had run in the same circles as the popular nobles, had both had bright and promising futures. But then life had come in and intervened through that blasted tourney, and the Stark girl, and turned their lives upside down, and now here they were on the other side of the world, waiting for the news that would leave them with no cause nor purpose once more. He dreaded the answer to the question that he was about to ask, but he needed to know. How is he? Septa Lemore's facade broke, and she was Shara Dane once more, the lady who had enchanted and captured so many young men's hearts, but had her heart captured by the Stark girl's eldest brother, and had borne him a stillborn girl after all. She spoke in a shaky voice as tears ran down her face. It's over, Jon. He closed his eyes and his breathing has stopped. It's over. Even though that was what he had expected, Jon still felt his world shatter, just as it had when he had learnt of Rhaegar's death on the Trident. He turned round and faced the city and tried to hide the tears that were trying to fall down his face. He did not hear the cheesemonger enter the balcony, but he did hear what he said. All is not lost, my friends. Prince Rhaegar did have one more son after all. Catelyn, my lady, Hall Mullen called. 2 riders had emerged from the tidy little camp beneath the castle, and were coming toward them at a slow walk. That will be Lord Stannis. No doubt, Catelyn watched them come. Stannis it must be, yet that is not the Baratheon banner. It was bright yellow, not the rich gold of Renly's standards, and the device it bore was red, though she could not make out its shape. Renly would be the last to arrive. He had told her as much when she set out. He did not propose to mount his horse until he saw his brother well on his way. The first to arrive must wait on the other, and Renly would do not waiting. It is a sort of game kings play, she told herself. Nor is Renly a true king, though so. Why he played it, she knew not. Perhaps it was the Tyrell's influence. As he neared, she saw that Stannis wore a crown of red and gold with points fashioned in the shape of flames. His belt was studded with garnets and yellow topaz, and a great square-cut ruby was set in the hilt of the sword he wore. Otherwise his dress was plain. studded leather jerkin over the quilted doublet, worn boots, breeches of brown rough spun. The device on his sun-yellow banner showed a red heart surrounded by a blaze of orange fire. The crowned stag was there, yes, shrunken and enclosed within the heart. Even more curious was his standard-bearer, a woman, garbed all in reds, face shadowed within the deep hood of her scarlet cloak. A red priestess, Catelyn thought, wondering. The sect was numerous and powerful in the free cities in the distant east, but there were few in the Seven Kingdoms. "Lady Stark," Stannis Baratheon said, with chill courtesy, as he reined up. "Lord Stannis," she returned, "I had not thought to find you at Storm's End. I had not thought to be here." He regarded her uncomfortably. "I am sorry for your lord's death, though Eddard Stark was never a friend to me. He was never your enemy, my lord. When the lords Tyrell and Redwine held you prisoner in that castle, starving, it was Eddard Stark who broke that siege. At my brother's command, not for love of me," Stannis answered. Catelyn was beginning to tire of Stannis's words, and so asked him, "Why are you here, my lord? Why have you not replied to my nephew's raven? Why are you fighting your brother and not helping rid the land of the Lannisters once and for all?" Before Stannis could answer, his standard-bearer said, "Because King Stannis is the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. He is the Lord's chosen one, and your nephew is but a boy and an usurper besides." Catelyn saw Stannis bristle at the woman's words and suspected that it was more at her urging that he was here. She tried to seize on that by saying, "My lord, you are known to be an honorable and dutiful man. This is not like you. If you and your brother could put aside your quarrel and recognize my nephew as the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms as heir to Rhaegar Targaryen, then we could combine our forces together to rid ourselves of the Lannisters." Stannis looked uncomfortable, but once again, before he could answer, the Red Woman spoke. "How do we know that your nephew is who he claims to be? The word of Eddard Stark, a traitor who said those words with a sword over his head. The word of a man who kept this secret of his from his best friend for nigh on 14 years. How are we to believe that this is the truth?" Before Catelyn could reply, Lord Dustin, who had been sent as part of her escort, spoke up and said, "Because I was there the day Lord Eddard rode to the Tower of Joy to get his sister. I fought alongside him as we battled 3 of the finest Kingsguard to have ever lived. I was there when Lord Eddard came out of the tower, holding his nephew, his grace, King Jon. I was there when he told us the truth of what had happened between his sister and Prince Rackar, how they ran away together, and how they married in sight of the old gods. That, my lady, is your proof." Stannis looked increasingly uncomfortable, and seemed to be itching to say something, but before he could, Renly rode up and began to mock Stannis, his red lady, and his sigil. The icing on the cake was when he said to Stannis, as part of his terms, "I propose that you dismount, bend your knee, and swear me allegiance." Stannis choked back rage. "That you shall never have." "You served Robert. Why not me? Robert was my elder brother. You are the younger." "Younger, bolder, and far more comely, and a thief and a usurper besides. The Targaryens called Robert usurper. He seemed able to bear the shame. So shall I." Catelyn had had enough. Enough of this senseless bickering. "You have both heard the truth of my nephew, his grace King Jon's parentage, from myself and from Lord Dustin. You are both usurpers if you try to continue to pursue a claim to the throne. Would it not be better for us to join together and crush the Lannisters and then march on King's Landing?" Both men were silent for a moment before Stannis looked at Renly and said, "You have till dawn to reconsider your position. If you do not bend, we shall come to war, and I shall destroy you." He turned his horse round and galloped back to his tent. The Red Woman looked at them all before looking at Renly and saying, "Look to your sins, Lord Renly," and before she too rode on. Renly's camp after the meeting was one of suspense and anticipation, as all the men prepared for the upcoming battle. Lord Tarley urged Renly to attack at night, to rout Stannis and take him by surprise. Throughout all the urgings of his lords, Renly merely smiled and nodded and said not a word in agreement. Catelyn could not help but feel that something was terribly amiss here. The men were too happy for the battle. Stannis was no green boy, and that Red Lady had had a strange aura around her that reeked of magic. Her suspicions, it seemed, were confirmed. When after coming back from her prayers at a sept in the nearby village, she went to speak with Renly, and, whilst exchanging words with him, when she saw what she thought looked like a thin outline of Stannis' shadow, enter the tent and move toward Renly. But before she could say anything, Renly had fallen to the floor, gasping for air, with blood pouring out of his throat. Sir Robor Royce and Sir Emincui entered the tent at Brienne's cries, and looked at their king's lifeless body. then at Brienne covered in Renly's blood, and drew their swords. Sir Aemon advanced on Brienne and was ruthlessly cut to pieces by Brienne. Sir Robar looked at her hesitatingly. Then, when Catelyn swore on her honor as a Stark that Brienne had not killed Renly, he promised to hold off the others. Catelyn had to drag Brienne towards where her men were. Sir Wendell Manderly was all in a lather to know what had happened. "My lady, the camp has gone mad," he blurted out. Lord Renly, as he stopped suddenly staring at Brienne and the blood that drenched her. "Dead, but not by our hands." "The battle," Hal Mullen began. "There will be no battle." Catelyn mounted and her escort formed up about her, with Sir Wendell to her left and Sir Pruin in the white of the King's Guard on her right. "Brienne, we brought mounts enough for twice our number. Choose one and come with us." "I have my own horse, my lady, and my armor." "Leave them. We must be well away before they think to look for us. We were both with the king when he was killed. That will not be forgotten." Wordless Brienne turned and did as she was bid. "Ride," Catelyn commanded her escort when they were all horse. "If any man tries to stop us, cut him down." As the long fingers of dawn fanned across the fields, color was returning to the world. Where gray men had sat, gray horses armed with shadow spears, the points of 1,000 lances now glinted silverly cold, and on the myriad flapping banners Catelyn saw the blush of red and pink and orange, the richness of blues and browns, the blues and browns, the blaze of gold and yellow, all the power of Storm's End and Highgarden, the power that had been Renly's an hour ago. Where did they belong now? She wondered. She remembered the look in the Red Lady's eyes when she had spoke to Renly before riding away, and shivered. There was one king less in the land, or a Jew. He was sworn to protect and obey, had been since he was little more than a lad. He was sworn to observe and comment when asked, and so he observed as Prince Doran met with his brother Prince Oberyn and Lord Yarenwood in the Water Gardens. One hot day, whilst the sounds of children's laughter could be heard, Prince Doran sighed and began to speak. "Lord Renly is dead. Stannis Baratheon will try and take his men and storm King's Landing." Prince Oberyn said nothing, but Lord Yarenwood laughed. "So honor-bound Stannis is a kinslayer now, hey? Some king he will make." Prince Doran did not deign to reply to that comment, and said, "I have agreed to let my son Prince Trystane marry Princess Myrcella Baratheon, questions of her parentage withstanding." Once again Prince Oberyn said nothing, nor did Lord Yarenwood this time. Prince Doran continued, "The Iron Throne think they have bought our loyalty with this marriage. Renly assumed we would join him for revenge against the Lannisters for Arya and her children. Stannis will assume we will join him as the rightful king, though he is not. We will do none of these things. King Jon Targaryen is the king we shall support. Had Rhaenys and Aegon lived, he would have been their brother. Elia told me once before she died that she often wondered what life would be like with the Stark girl. Once Rhaegar and the girl came home. King Jon has not made promises to us regarding vengeance, but he does not need to. He knows we will march for a Targaryen for our vengeance. Lord Yarenwood, I have assembled a host of 10,000 men under the command of Sir Rian Allier. I want you to muster another 10,000 men and bring them through the Prince's Pass. You are to declare you are fed up with my leadership and are rebelling. I shall tell Sir Rian to let you through. Once through, you are to harass the Reachmen still in the Reach, and then march to join King Jon's host in the Riverlands. Oberyn, you shall take up the seat on the small council offered by Lord Tyrion, and find out what you can about the situation there, and who truly rules. And when the time is right, we shall destroy House Lannister from within." Is that understood? Our viewer heard both men answer in the affirmative, then heard Prince Doran say, "Good. Leave me now, the both of you. Get to work, and make sure no one else knows of our plans."
Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this reimagined story and audiobook style presentation, feel free to like and subscribe for more content like this. New stories and alternate scenarios are updated regularly. Now see you in the next video.